There is a lot of silver out there. That is, it's not just gone or consumed. It's available to the market.
I promise I don't wake up in the morning, stretch out my arms, yawn, and start thinking about ways to upset silver stackers or piss off everyone over on Reddit. One of the challenges we face in this community is that we often learn about stacking the same way teenagers learn about sex, from each other. And let me tell you, that's a dangerous way for folks to learn things. It's dangerous not only for your money, but also for your sex life. Wait, we're supposed to be talking about gold and silver stacking. Anyway, my point is that there's a lot of misinformation that passes through our community, especially from creators. What challenges me is that I can't tell if it's their laziness or a lack of knowledge or their desire for confirmation bias, but they seem overly interested in pushing certain unchecked narratives.
You can't ignore the facts. If your goal is to be religious about your favorite metal, fine, go knock yourself out. But if your goal is to make money, you cannot ignore facts.
One of the tenets of behavioral finance is understanding how psychology and personal biases affect the behavior of investors, which then ultimately impacts your results and the decisions you make. In particular, one of the most dangerous biases is information bias, because part of our human nature, part of our human condition is to seek out and prioritize information that fits our preconceived notions, while at the same time ignoring information that contradicts what we believe. For some of you, this video is going to be a direct attack on a so-called sacred belief that there is an imminent shortage of silver. While I agree that inevitably there will be a shortage of silver, Rick Rule warns us not to confuse inevitable with imminent. Math and numbers around silver supply and demand can be tricky because the promoters and hypers have in some ways cherry-picked the data and used some faulty logic to create the narrative that supports what they want to believe, aka feeding their confirmation bias. Pause for a moment and really think about who are the people that scream about shortages the most. If we're really being honest, we would say it is that people who are directly connected with bullion dealers, the miners, or people who benefit from the narrative, or someone that's trying to get a click for a video. Here's another clip from Lobo Tigre.
The point is that some of these deficit numbers assume that silver that is actually still available to the market is off the market. That's a problem, right? And it's a lot.
For some people in the community, silver stacking is almost a religion, and that's fine. Knock yourself out. But my goal for this channel is to help you learn so that you can be a better investor, get a better return on your investment in gold and silver, to help you get more meaningful ounces, show you the facts, tell you the truth, and hopefully make you a better person in the process. First, I want you to know all the data and tables I'm going to show you come from the 2023 World Silver Survey produced by the Silver Institute. I will link to that in the description. We all learned in Econ 101 that supply and demand have a direct impact on the item's price. Well, if that's the case, we should be able to see some relationship between silver supply, surpluses, or deficits, and silver price. But what do we really see when it's charted? Take a look at this. As we can see, there really isn't a correlation. We have periods when there are surpluses and the prices go up, like in 2016, but the following year we had a surplus and the price went down. And then in 2020, prices went up when there was a surplus. We also have deficits in 2013, 21, and 22, and prices went down. That tells me that our first takeaway is that the correlation or relationship between prices and inventory are not very high or very reliable. Okay, let's do a quick deep dive into supply so that we can set the table for more discussion. Global supply is largely consistent, even though we do see some lower numbers from mining output, which appears to be offset by recycling. I will also highlight that there is a lot of documentation that recycling does increase as prices increase. Essentially, at lower prices, recycling isn't very cost beneficial. This next slide shows you where the recycling comes from, which is overwhelmingly from industry. All right, now let's shift to demand. Let's focus on the baby blue line here that shows the increase in industrial demand we often hear about. While that number is steadily increasing, would any of you really call that skyrocketing? If you listen to the wrong people, you'd think that solar and EV demand was already driving silver demand through the roof. While that is increasing, what about the other side of the equation? Like industries that aren't using as much silver, or industries that use less as prices increase. That aside, let's look at US physical investment. And in all honesty, I only included this slide because there's a lot of debate on YouTube about buying coins versus bars. And if you've been around here for a while, you know that I'm a proponent for buying bars because typically you get more ounces for your dollar. I want you to notice the shift that has occurred over the last few years in particular. From 2013 to 2008, coin purchases dominated the market, but that just isn't the case anymore. And now we see bars exceeding coins in 2022 in particular. I'm just saying, it seems that the consumers are sending a clear message The same message we've been sending here. Now, let's get to the real bottom line. This is the supply demand table from the report, and frankly, there's a lot to take in. So I've reduced the table down, I blew it up as large as I could here to show you that supply has definitely peaked, and it peaked in 2014. But the change between 2014 and 2022 is only 2.7% lower. Again, not as extreme as people would make you believe on YouTube. Let's look at the demand part of the table. And the bottom line shows that demand has varied a good bit, so much so that the difference between the low of 901 million ounces and 2021 high of 1,242 million ounces is a 37% difference. In fact, the large increases have really been over the last 3 years. This slide won't be up long, but it gives you a breakdown of physical demand by countries, and of course, that number varies significantly. Here's where the trickery usually starts by the pumpers and the hypers. This is the same table, but now I'm going to focus our attention on the market balance, and this is where people start waving their hands and screaming that we are in deficit and we're going to run out of silver. And while that is accurate, it's not 100% correct. Follow me. The chart shows that part of silver demand includes silverware, jewelry, and physical investment, which I've highlighted here in purple. Okay, for a moment, let's just pretend that all silver used in the industry goes to silver heaven, never to be recovered again. Now, what happens to the silver that goes into silverware, jewelry, and physical investment? I think we will all agree that it's still silver. It may be transformed in a different way, being sterling silver or whatever, or it may be stored in your safe, but it still doesn't go to silver heaven. It's still here, meaning at any point it could be returned to the marketplace and become inventory.
Is that silver is deemed investment use? It's still there. It's still silver in bullion form or coin form. It's available to come back on the market.
Also, as the table shows, those three numbers can vary dramatically, as we've seen 37% swings in the last 10 years. But look at what the Silver Institute had to say about this. And this is directly from the report, but let me zoom in and I'm going to read it to you. Quote, "For the time being, we believe that there remains enough inventory. London vaulted stocks alone, after all, amount to more than 1 year mine's production." They also acknowledge, quote, "Eventually, much of this stockpile will be depleted." Notice they said eventually. Then they even say, quote, "It's important to stress here that this does not suggest the world is running out of silver." And here's the most important thing I want you to hear. Quote, "After all, our above ground stock definition does not include coins and bars held by individual investors around the world. In the past 10 years alone, such investors accumulated more than 2.4 billion ounces, or which is 75,000 tons of silver in such forms." Please tell me you heard that, right? See, the hypers and promoters conveniently ignore that part, the data that says we still have 75,000 tons just in the last 10 years that's being held by investors. So try to estimate what that number really looks like over the last 50 years of people investing in silver. Let's not also forget that this doesn't account for the jewelry and silverware that could be easily recycled. And let me tell you, when prices get high enough, people sell their scrap jewelry and they'll even sell grandma's antique silverware for the right price. Right about now, I know someone is screaming at the screen saying, "What about COMEX inventories being drained? They show this every week on different channels." That's true, but your argument doesn't take into consideration all the other vaults that hold silver inventories as well. Talking only about the COMEX is like saying Kleenex is the only tissue paper maker. No, Kleenex is what we call all of it, but there are multiple tissue makers. Finally, I've created a spreadsheet for you which really summarizes the tables that we looked at. And here in green, you see where I added back silverware, jewelry, and physical investment to the market surplus or deficit to show that while there may be a paper deficit, there is still plenty of silver above ground. It didn't all go to silver heaven. And all that silver needs is a willing seller and the right price, and it's right back into inventory. I know that many of you might not ever sell, but I'm 100% clear. For the right price, you can have all my silver. Almost every piece has a price. Regardless, here are the 7 key takeaways. There isn't a reliable relationship between silver prices and inventories. 2, at least in the short term, I say 7 to 10 years, silver deficits mean nothing to me. Because 3, demand, especially industrial demand, is nowhere near the levels that could move price even if they were correlated. 4, Investors have been and are shifting to purchasing bars more than coins. 5. Supply peaked in 2014, but again, that change between the highest and the lowest supply, which occurred in 14 versus 2022, is only 2.7% lower. Now, again, not very extreme as some purport. 6. Over the last 10 years, we've seen demand vary as much as 37%. 7. There's some trickery around silver supply and demand, specifically deficits and us running out of silver, and it really revolves around an accounting or a paper deficit. And while that is accurate, it's not 100% correct. Supply and demand calculations are different from calculating a deficit because it should not include investment demand and it should not count ounces that still exist above ground. When the rubber meets the road, silver just doesn't need false narratives in order to be valuable. It is inherently valuable and proven to be over time. What you don't need as an investor is people pushing false narratives or parroting bad information that can lead to unreasonable expectation and poor decisions. Silver inventories don't reliably impact prices, and while annual demands exceed annual supplies, there isn't a true deficit of the metal. It's just being stored in other forms and not in 1,000 ounce COMEX bars or over in London or Asia. The next time you see or hear someone say something about a shortage, you tell them to stuff it and send them the link to this video. In the comments section, did I miss anything? And what price would it take for you to sell your silver, if at all? Or simply put an A+ in the comments so that everyone knows that you always stack smarter and never stop learning.